Hey YouTube, Bob here. Want to welcome you to the next edition of my first-party Nintendo Player's Guides playlist. And this is actually part 2 of the Game Boy series, because as you know, in part 1 we do a brief overview of all the player's guides that I have for a particular console, and then you get a chance to vote which one you would like to see a little bit more of an in-depth look at in the following video. So as you can see on the results screen here, Link's Awakening barely beat out Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. So that is the one that we're going to be taking a look at here. So right off the bat, you can see it has a similar aesthetic to the other player's guides from this era. One thing that I enjoy about this one is this rectangle in the middle with the title. It actually has quite a bit of detail. It's Link's raft from the game, and of course it has a wood texture, and you can also see some nails there that would be holding together the pieces of the raft. But as part of this aesthetic in this era of player's guides, it also says, "Your link to surviving the nightmares of Koholint from the pros at Nintendo." So kind of a little play on words, or some type of link to the actual content of the game. And by link I mean connection, so there's a pun of a pun for you. But they always go with this, straight from the pros at Nintendo. And then we've got the official Nintendo seal of quality there. So turning it over to the back, you can see we have a bigger version of the raft here, a little bit more detail. You can see those nails even bigger. And it's got these arrows. I was never quite sure about this particular aesthetic that they applied to this era of player's guides, but there the arrows are. And this first paragraph says, "Link survives a shipwreck, only to face the nightmares of Koholint Island. An all-new adventure unfolds when Link, the hero of..." Oh boy, here we go. In my other video I mentioned, Hylian or Hylian Lore. This, of course, is derived from the word Hyrule, and it's the adjective form of Hyrule. And sorry to get all grammar-y on you, but I am a Spanish teacher, so being a grammar nerd is kind of what I do. And like I mentioned in one of my other videos, is that as a 13-year-old reading this guide, I'd never come across this word before. So Hylian, that actually does make more sense if you're going to compare it to Hyrule, from which it is probably derived. But my 13-year-old brain always wanted to say Hylian, so that's what I'm going to go with. Hylian Lore. Old habits die hard, right? Is caught in a furious squall that rips his ship apart and pitches him into the sea. He washes ashore on the mystery-shrouded Koholint, an uncharted isle unlike any he has explored before. After enduring the nightmarish ordeal, Link learns that a strange and mystic legend casts a great shadow over this island. Ever one to rise to a challenge, Link puts his courage and cunning to the test as he seeks answers that will solve the mystery of the legendary windfish that slumbers atop the island's most lofty peak. So then we've got this adventure's log is a must for anyone attempting to chart a course through the perils and intrigues of Koholint Island. And inside these covers are detailed maps to help you avoid pitfalls and find the island's hidden riches. So it starts off saying, no adventurer should set out without this 112-page player's guide. So let's vet that claim right away here. Open it up. Yep, and sure enough, 112 pages with, of course, the obligatory Nintendo Power ad on the back inside cover. But let's not start at the end. Let's start at the beginning. So if we open this up, we've got some nice artwork there of Koholint Island, and that's one of the hallmarks of these player's guides, really, is the art that they included, specifically in the Legend of Zelda player's guides. Spoiler alert, for the Super NES player's guide, I'm probably going to choose A Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, because I gotta tell you, the art in that one and just the words they were using, I'm going to get into more detail, but I learned a lot of words just by reading that player's guide as a 12-year-old. So they really put a lot of effort and detail into these as far as the art and the text is concerned. So you can see that this player's guide is broken up into 3 main sections: the legend, the adventure, and profits and perils. So this first section is kind of what I was just talking about. It goes into all this unnecessary but very welcome detail. A lot of artwork, a lot of backstory, and I'll show you what they say about those things. The meat and potatoes of this player's guide is kind of the walkthrough itself, the adventure, where it takes you through all of the overworld tasks as well as the maps for the labyrinths. And then finally, you know it wouldn't be a Zelda game if there weren't a whole lot of things to collect. Heart container pieces, and in this game, shells. So this is where they kind of lay out for you where all of those things are if you get frustrated because you just can't find that last one. So that's what the last section is all about. But we're going to start off with the legend. Hyrulean Odyssey. All right, we're gonna do some grammar here right now. Actually, let me make sure. Did I skip a page? I did skip a page. All right, we'll save the grammar lesson for a minute. So, the greatest adventure ever for Game Boy. With The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening, the Game Boy handheld system takes an evolutionary step forward. Link's Awakening combines the graphic sophistication of the Super NES adventure, A Link to the Past, with characters and music from the original Zelda game. In fact, Link's Awakening has more depth and challenge than any previous Zelda game, which means that players may need more tips and strategies than ever before. That's where a Nintendo Player's Guide can help. In this book, you'll travel with Link through the puzzles and perils of Hylian Island. You'll learn the secrets of trading goods with the peculiar inhabitants as you strive to survive the ravages of the nightmares. In these pages, you'll find precise maps of the entire island. You'll explore each room of every dungeon, castle, and cave, and discover what items lie hidden there. When monsters attack, you can turn to the enemy index and learn the best battle techniques. If you are wandering lost in darkness, this player's guide will lead you back to the light. You can delve as deep as you want or use the player's guide as a last resort. But either way, this is the only source for complete help on Link's Awakening. Look for more Nintendo Player's Guides for the most complete game coverage from the pros. In that little introduction there, they kind of mentioned that this Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening game was an evolutionary step for the Game Boy, and that it has more depth than any previous Zelda game, which is kind of interesting to think of because this game was released just after the 16-bit Legend of Zelda Link to the Past on the Super NES. So I know that they're trying to sing the Game Boy's praises by saying how good this game is, but you also think backwards, well, what does that say about A Link to the Past? And honestly, they're both very good games. This one adds an additional jumping mechanic that we hadn't seen in the top-down Zelda games up until this point. But yeah, it looked a lot like the Super NES version, just obviously monochromatic. But it had just as much depth and some new mechanics, which is where I think they were trying to go in saying that it had more depth and challenge. It has lots of different mechanics. But as we move on here, we've got the legend and then some artwork there, which is really pretty cool. So now on to that Hyrulean Odyssey. All right, so we're going to put that aside for a second and then continue on. Legendary Hyrule. Long ago and far away there lived a magical people called the Hylians. All right, now wait a minute. We need to pick which adjective form of Hyrule, or pertaining to Hyrule, or of Hyrule. Because I think even Nintendo at this point wasn't really set on their vernacular for what they were going to call things related to the mystical, magical place of Hyrule. So right away we've got Hyrulean Odyssey. That's obviously an adjective form describing Odyssey. But then if we go back to the outside cover here, and Hylian Lore. So Hylian is an adjective describing the word lore, or Hylian as 13-year-old Bob would have pronounced it. So Nintendo seems to be juggling two different adjective forms of Hyrulean or Hylian. So at this point they hadn't really picked one. If anybody knows the difference, if there is one even between Hyrulean or Hylian, let me know. But outside of this guide, I really haven't seen this version, Hyrulean, very much. However, now they introduce a new, right here, a new version or a new part of speech of the word, which is another noun form, Hylians. So Hylian is the noun form referring to the actual people of Hyrule. So we have two adjective forms, Hyrulean and Hylian, and then we have a noun form, Hylian. So, and it's spelled differently, as you can see. Hylian with an E, and then is the adjective form, Hylian with an I. So at this point, I don't even know if Nintendo knew what they were talking about, but let's continue on. Their magic lit up the land with wonders, but they were doomed to dwindle over the years. In time, only a few people in the land of Hyrule could be called Hylians, and their magic was only a shadow of what it once had been. In that weaker age, an object called the Triforce held much of the land's power. When the King of Thieves, Ganondorf, stole the Triforce, a new dark world was opened. And we actually have a picture of A Link to the Past right here. That's a screenshot from the very end of the game. So as far as the timeline is concerned, and by the way, this was all pre-split timeline theories with Ocarina of Time, or Ocarina of Time, whichever you prefer. This was where we all understood that the original Legend of Zelda came after Legend of Zelda A Link to the Past for the Super NES. That was a prequel. This game was supposed to be the sequel to Legend of Zelda A Link to the Past, and then after this game was supposed to come the original Legend of Zelda for the Nintendo Entertainment System, and then finally the sequential Zelda 2 Link's Adventure, or Adventure of Link. So what they do in this, what did they call it? Was it history, or what did they say? The legend. So in this legend section, what they kind of do is go back and give you a little synopsis of all the games that came chronologically in the real world before this game. So here's The Legend of Zelda, talking about the original NES adventure. Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, which was the direct sequel to that game. And then Legend of Zelda A Link to the Past, which was the prequel to the original Legend of Zelda. So between A Link to the Past and the original Legend of Zelda was Link's Awakening, which they go into and show you through beautiful art and lots of descriptive text, the backstory, and how Link ended up on Koholint Island. So this goes on for several pages. We have about 5 pages of backstory, and then we get to kind of a registry here of all the items that Link can have. Basics of the controls, things you can do in the game. And then what's new? This gets into different areas of the sub-screen where you select your items. Talks about the new jumping mechanic that was introduced in the top-down games. Link had already been jumping in Zelda 2 Adventure of Link, but that was a side-scrolling portion. So this is the first time Link was jumping from the top-down perspective. And then just some tips and strategies for getting around castles and caves before we head into the main section of the player's guide, which is the walkthrough, called The Adventure. Again, with some nice art there. So they give you the entire world map here, broken down into sections, and the page number on which it starts. So Area 1, Mabe Village, starts on page 20, which is the very next page. And we can see Mabe Village, Area 1, is right here in this section of the map. So we'll open up to Mabe Village. Gives you kind of an overview of the area. A little bit of a detail shot here of that whole section of the map. And a legend, alphabetical legend here of some of the points of interest. Then it takes you on the walkthrough of all the main things that you're supposed to accomplish while in this area. Then you progress on to the next one, Toronbo Shores. Same deal, we have an overview in text, and then a graphical overview with all the points of interest in that alphabetical legend there. Mysterious Forest is a third area of the map that you head to. Again, same format here. And then finally you get to level 1, the Tail Cave. So of course, since this is one of the labyrinths, we're not going to see the overworld map. We're going to see a detailed view right here of the map itself. So you can see it labels the entrance, where the main items are, where the boss room is, and it gives you some data there. Then as you continue on in the overview for a labyrinth here, it actually breaks down the specific rooms, and the map is reduced to this kind of pixelated view here, where you know the yellow portion is where you are, and this is where what you're supposed to accomplish in this particular area, and it gives you a screenshot for some detail to help you understand further. So it takes you with lots of amount of detail through every portion of the labyrinth, and even gives you strategies for the end boss, which is Moldorm in this particular labyrinth. So the pattern continues on, telling you about what you're supposed to do in the certain parts of the overworld, and then by the time you're supposed to end up in another labyrinth, it will tell you you're in level 1 or level 2. So this continues on for the majority of the player's guide. Once you get to the end, it does show you some of the final screens of what you're going to encounter with Ganon, the final Ganon fight, and it shows you a still of one of the ending screens. But it doesn't spoil the ending. I don't see any credits or anything like that. So then the next section after the main walkthrough is Profits and Perils. So, Profits and Perils, Pieces of Heart and Secret Shells gives you very detailed descriptions of the locations of those items here in kind of a chart format. Trade Up, Power Up. One of the new mechanics of this game was trading items, so it shows you how all of that works. Secret Sites. Secrets that you can find in the typical Zelda fashion, and shows you where they are. Be they a fairy spring, Mad Batter's lair, or treasure trees. There are various locations with color items, color icons rather, throughout the world map here. The enemy roster of all the baddies that you'll encounter along the way. And the neat thing about this is it tells you the best weapons to use against them, and if you do take a hit from them, how many hit points or hearts it will cost you. So you can see the Octoroks, you can use a whole lot of different items on them, and they will only cost you half a hit point if you get hit by them. So that continues on for a couple pages, the kind of bestiary here. The ones in the underworld and the labyrinths. And then traps, things that aren't necessarily living things. Guardians, and the 9 Nightmares. Tricks of the Trade. This is kind of a fun section. I've never seen this in any other player's guide. This game, I watched a review on it, and the review called this game surprisingly self-aware. It made lots of little jokes, and it just seemed to be aware of itself, and this is kind of a continuation of that. There were lots of little fun things you can do in the game that may not be very useful, but they're just fun, and the game makers knew that. So Make Music, Birds of a Feather, Stop Thief, Save Rupees, Bomb and Bow. Whatever these fun things are, they kind of rate them here. You can see there's a fun and function meter. So this first one has only 2 stars, so it may not be very, it's fun, but it may not be very functional. The one that I was reading, it had only 1 star. Let me see if I can find that one. Here we go. Yeah, Rough Landing. Fun and function meter, 1 star. Think twice before taking leaps when you have Marin in tow. If you jump into a well, like the one on Mabe Village's western border, Marin will jump right after you do. You'll land as usual, but if you don't get out of the way, she'll flatten you as she lands. Okay, so she does apologize, but it still hurts. So the caption says, after Marin joins you, go exploring. If you take her to the well on the west side of Mabe Village and jump in, she'll follow you right into the well. You're in for a rough landing if you don't get out of Marin's way after both of you jump into the well. She'll land right on top of you. So the in-game dialogue is, oh, I'm sorry, are you okay? So there's a little bit of humor in the dialogue and the text of this game. And then as we continue on, the last couple pages to close out the guide. Lots more of these fun and function metered things you could do in the game. And that's how it closes out. The end. Or is it? Wow, that's got a 5-star on the function meter, fun and function meter rating. So, very interesting there. Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening was a very unique game, and you're probably aware that it was recently re-released on the Switch, but definitely upgraded, full color, new graphics. This guide will actually work quite well for that game, obviously barring any new content that was introduced in the Switch upgrade. But that's all we have for now. Look forward to the next installment of the Player's Guide playlist when we take a look at the Super NES Player's Guides. Until then, thank you for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.